Right. I'm going to share with you, my sermon today is the story or the tale of two men. Thank you. Right. Who know Eric Liddell? Who know about him? So, it's a guy from Chariots of Fire. You saw the movie. Most of us saw the movie. I want to tell you a little bit today about Eric Liddell. So, he was born in 1902. Both his parents were missionaries, and they were missionaries in China. So, he was born in China, and then they sent him to school in England. And when he was at school, he excelled with sport. And after that, if you can go to the next slide, please, he went to Edinburgh University. At Edinburgh, he played the rugby for the first team, and he did athletics as well. So he played for Scotland. He got chosen for Scotland, and he played for them for 2 years. He played rugby for them. But he also, when he's running, he was really, really good, especially on 100 meter. And then he broke the British record in the 100 meters, and before the 1924 Olympic Games, he in the trials, he beat the guy, he beat the other Briton, Harold Abrams, who eventually won the 100 meter in the 1924 Olympics in Paris. He beat him in the trials, and he got chosen to represent Britain or the British Isles in Paris at the Olympic Games in the 100 meters. Then the program came out and said that the 100 meters final is going to be on a Sunday. And then he objected to that because, his Christian faith was very, very important to him, and he didn't compromise. So he said that he's not going to run for Britain in the 100 meters. But luckily, he could run in the 200 and 400 as well. Definitely not his best time, his best events. But because he was so good in the 100 meters, Britain then decided that they will then write him in for the 200 and 400 meters. At that stage, in the 400 meters, he was third in the world with time, and the other two guys, number 1 and 2 in the world, were way faster than him, more than a second faster than him. So he went into the Olympic Games, and then the guy that he won in the trials for Britain, for the British team, won the 100 meters. So he could have won the gold medal, but he stood firm and said, I'm not going to compromise on my Christian beliefs, and I'm not going to run on a Sunday. And that was very important for him. And there was a lot of pressure for him, especially from the British people. And they said, no, you not neglected your country, but you let your country down. You let your country down. And because he could run in the 4x100 meter relays as well. And they were really upset about his decision. But he just stuck to his beliefs, and he said, I'm not going to run. So the day when he ran the 400 meters at the Paris Olympic Games, he was in the outside lane. Now, when you're an athlete and you run in the outside lane, and you know that the two fastest people in the inside lane, and fastest people in the world, is in the inside lane, and it's not your strong point, the 400 meter. Then you got a very, very difficult race ahead of you because you don't know how fast you must run. So the two guys on the inside, they could clearly see where he was, and they could then work out their race and plan their race according to when the race go on to see when they have to put in a sprint. He started off that race as fast as he could. And he outran those two guys in the inside lane, and he broke the world record with 1 second. This is an incredible testimony. This is an incredible testimony for a guy that put God first, and he watched somebody else, the guy that came second, winning the gold in the 100 meter, the Olympics, on the Olympics, and thinking for himself, man, I could have won a gold. And then he went on, he broke the world record, and he and then obviously got gold in the Olympic Games. So, the year after after he won the Olympic Games, he studied in physics. He finished his degree, and then he went to China as a missionary teacher. So, I'm telling you this story about this guy, this incredible guy, and then a year later, in 1925, he went to China, 23 years of age. What do you hear when I tell you this story? What do you hear? Yeah, that's true. You know, God's mercy on him. But what about Eric Liddell do you hear? He put God first.
Doing a lot of graciousness or wiseness,
Yeah, or a medal or anything like that. God was important for him. God was the most important thing to him. His Christianity, his relationship with Jesus was a no-compromise relationship. Right. So, they asked him when he left to China again now. You can imagine this guy, he's playing for Scotland 2 years now in a row, and they won the 6 nations or 5 nations at that stage. They had a very, very good team. And then and the next year after he finished the Olympic Games, breaking the world record, he goes and become a missionary teacher in China. So they ask him, it has been a wonder. So they obviously ask him, man, you still got a lot of athletics in you. You can still win a lot of medals. And then he said, it has been a wonderful experience to compete in the Olympic Games and to bring home a gold medal. But since I've been a young lad, I've had my eyes on a different prize. You see, each one of us is in a great race than any I have run in Paris. And this race ends when God gives out the medals. This race ends when God gives out the medals. That was the important thing for him. So that is when he left at 24 years of age or 23 years of age. Right. Now go on to the next slide. Who of you know Jonathan Edwards? Have you heard about Jonathan Edwards? Jonathan Edwards has got an incredible story. Unfortunately, they didn't make a movie of him, but he also has got a story. So he is born in 1966. His father is a vicar, also coming out of a Christian home. So now he is a late developer, and then at the end of high school and when he went to university, he also went and studied physics. He started doing triple jump. So he was chosen, he excelled in triple jump, and in 1991, he was chosen to represent Britain or England, they compete as Britain at the World Games. And then he declined it because of his faith. He was a devout Christian. So he said the triple jump final on that day was on a Sunday, and he said that he's not going to do that. He's not going to compromise his faith for his faith. Exactly the same story as that we heard from Eric Liddell. So, Christian parents brought up no compromise stand and then he got this the first time that he can go to a world game, and he declined it. So afterwards he had a chat with his dad, who was a vicar, and his dad said to him, they prayed a lot about this, and then his dad said to him, listen, you got a special talent. You are gifted in this. I feel that you must use your talent to the honor of and the glory of God, and that this platform that God has given you, you must use it, even if you go and jump on a Sunday. Use every opportunity that you can to go and honor God through your talent. And he did that. right throughout the 90s. He did that. At a stage in 2000, he won the triple jump at the Olympic Games. At that stage, he held the gold medal for the Olympic Games, the World Games, the European Games, and the Commonwealth Games. The only guy that could hold the gold medal in 3 of those important games. So, in 2003, at the age of 37, he then retired. He married a Christian girl. She, both parents also were evangelists, also in the missionary field. So he married a Christian girl. He got 2 sons. He decided then in 2003 to stop competing. But then he was, as I said to you, he was at 37 years of age at that stage. Then after that, he went, if you can just put on the next slide, he went and presented Songs of Praise, which is a very important a program on Sundays. When you go to England and you go and watch BBC, you will see this is an important program for them. So he hosted the Song of Praise from 2003. Right. So what do you hear from this guy? What do you hear about him? When I tell you his story, what do you hear? Same story. Same, exactly the same. No compromise. No compromise on his faith. He really seeks God, and every opportunity which he had, he used to the honor and glory of God. So now, I'm going to tell you a story again. We're going to go back to Eric Liddell. So after he's left Edinburgh, he went to China. As I said to you, he became a teacher in a school of affluent Chinese people, where it was rich Chinese children that came to that school. And he said he's going to teach at that school and teach them about Jesus, because these are influential kids. And one day they will have an influence in their area of where they're going to go to. And this is how he's going to spread the word. Yep. So there on the left side is Eric Liddell. When he ran the 1924 Olympic Games. So now he went over to China. He was really a successful and loved teacher. And then the Japanese invaded China. And when the Japanese invaded China, Britain sent a message to all their citizens in China and say, get out of China. The Japanese are coming. So his wife, and she was pregnant at that stage, and the other 2 kids went onto the boat, but he decided to stay because his brother was a doctor in the northern part of China, and he was working in a very, very poor community, and he was exhausted. And he knew his brother needed help. So he declined to get onto that boat to get out of Japan, and out of China. And he then went and to go and help his brother. And then when he was there, you can see the Japanese arrived. So he's the second person from the right-hand side. So he ended up in a Japanese camp, and it was really, really tough. And they didn't give them proper food, and he eventually died of a brain tumor in that camp without ever seeing his little girl, the third one that was born. 3 months before the end of the war, he died. What do you hear when I tell you this story? What do you hear? Faithfulness, right up to the end. Right up. That's what he said when he competed. He had the same heart right up to the end. And he died. And he died of 42 years of age. Right. I'm going to go back to Jonathan Edwards. Can you give me that? So Jonathan Edwards became a very good athletic commentator, and he's still an athletic commentator. He was awarded the Comrade of the British Empire, not Comrade, Commander of the British Empire, CBE. So he was given the CBE, that's just under a Sir. So that's a very important recognition for his athletics performance. So we're talking two different paths here. So he went into the athletics, becoming a commentator, and then he was decorated with a CBE. He's still alive now. He's 57 years of age. Different story than the one of Eric Liddell. But now I'm going to read two articles for you. So both of them had a similar life up to now. And then when you go in and you say, if somebody can write a story of my life at the end of my life, and it has to go into a newspaper, what will it say? What will it say about my life? Because that is a testimonial, obviously. At the end of your life, after you finish with athletics, after you've done all these huge achievements, what will they say about me? Can I be about the great donkey? So, I'm going to read the article to you about Eric Liddell that appeared in the Herald, the Scottish Herald, earlier this year. It says, your icon this week was a sprinter, a rugby player, and a Christian missionary. 3 activities your correspondent believes should be banned, therefore rendering him perfectly placed to provide a balanced and respectful portrait. This guy obviously is an atheist. He started off just with the beginning of the story. An atheist is now going to write about Eric Liddell. And then he goes on and he say, actually, after researching the life, I found Eric Liddell, the Flying Scotchman, admirable. If only he devoted himself to journalism or something equally worthwhile. Incredible. But let's go on. You'll know him from the film Chariots of Fire. Apologies if I've said that Vangelis theme tune worming through your ears. You'll remember our man refused to run a boot on a Sunday and so forth. But there was more to him than that. Eric Henry Liddell was born 16 January 1902, shortly after the anti-foreigner Boxer uprising in China. His parents were Scottish missionaries. Liddell attended school in China for a short while before being enrolled age 6 at Eltham College, a boarding school in London for missionary sons, though relatives frequently reunited to Edinburgh. At Eltham, Liddell was named best athlete of his year and became captain of the cricket and rugby union teams. His headmaster described him as entirely without vanity. In 1920, he enrolled at Edinburgh Uni, that is at Edinburgh University, for pure science, but became better known as Scotland's fastest runner. Newspapers were already calling him a potential Olympic winner. He also played rugby for the university club, gaining a place in the Scotland team, anything to avoid pure science. His main asset was speed, though student magazines said he also had rugby brains. Fortunately, he gave up scrums to focus on runs, winning a lot of things. In 1924, in that year, Paris Olympics, the devout Christian withdrew from the 100 meter, his strong point, because the heats were taking place on the Sabbath. The decision caused heat in the press, which questioned his patriotism. Liddell pooh-poohed all that and focused instead on the 400 meters held on a weekday. Ostensibly, his chances were slim, despite being cheered by the pipe band of the 51 Island Brigade playing outside the stadium beforehand. 2 of the runners had already set world records, and in addition, Eric was assigned the worst lane on the outside. However, he set such a blistering pace from the off that 2 other runners stumbled trying to keep up. He broke all records with a time of 47.66 seconds. The press praised him for his patriotism. In the aforementioned film, he says, God made me fast, and when I run, I feel his pleasure. bit weird in reality. He said, yeah, God gave every one of us, each one of us is in a greater race than any I have run in Paris. And this race, when God gives out the medals, an incentive to waddle slowly, you'd think. You just see the cynicism of this journalist. In 1925, the Scottish Amateur Athletics meeting, he equaled his own record, and then he won the 220 yards and the 440 yards both. These were his last races on British soil. He returned to northern China that year to serve as a missionary, revisiting Scotland only twice. He said, it's natural for a chap to think over all that sometimes, but I'm glad I'm at the work I'm engaged in now. A fellow's life counts so far more than the other. That was on the question asked if he regretted ditching athletics. Fair enough, Liddell's first missionary job was teacher at the college for wealthy Chinese students. He believed teaching future influential figures would promote Christian values. In 1934, he married Florence Mackenzie, whose Canadian parents were missionaries. The couple had 3 daughters, the last of whom Liddell would never live to see. In 1941, in the face of Japanese aggression, the British government advised its nationals to leave. Florence and the children departed for Canada, while Liddell took a tough gig at a rural mission station, where his doctor brother Rob was suffering from exhaustion. As a Japanese approached, Liddell dodged gunfire, carrying the injured to the hospital. When Japanese troops took over the mission station, he returned to Caijing and in 1943 was interned at a rat-filled camp in Wainsing. No running water, meals, a small bowl of soup with bread. Eric became a leader at the camp, and when rich internees smuggled in eggs, he shamed them into sharing them. He avoided factions but organized games, helped the elderly, and taught Bible classes and science to the children who called him Uncle Eric. Camp survivors recalled Liddell's charming Scottish brogue, his sense of humor, and the help afforded others who might not otherwise have survived. One described him as the finest Christian gentleman it has been my pleasure to meet. Another said he was as close to a saint as anyone I've ever known. After initially refusing, he even refereed a children's sports match on a Sunday to stop the guys from fighting in his absence. Alas, he was soon fighting for his life. On top of overwork and malnutrition, Liddell developed a brain tumor. He died aged 43 on 21 February 1945. The entire camp was grief-stricken. He was buried behind the Japanese officers' quarters. Eric Liddell is a hero far from forgotten. In 1991, Edinburgh University erected a memorial headstone at the former campsite. The Eric Liddell Centre was set up in Edinburgh in 1980 to honour his Christian values and community service. Next year, the Eric Liddell 100 will celebrate the centenary of the 1924 victory in Paris. Now, so this is his life. This is an article about him. It's an incredible testimony for us as Christians. If I can have an article like this about my life nearly 100 years later, or 80 years later, or 60 years later, it's incredible. And I think all of us would say, wow, what a testimony. What a testimony. He ran the race right up to the end. So, this is Eric Liddell. So, him and Jonathan Edwards walking two paths next to each other. So, I'm going to read an article for you about Jonathan Edwards in 2014. So, Jonathan Edwards was an Olympic and world champion, the first man to jump more than 60 feet. But ask people for one other thing they know about Jonathan Edwards, and the answer would likely to be his Christian faith. It was a cornerstone of life for this triple jumper, even costing him a place at the 1991 World Championships after he refused to compete on a Sunday. But then, 16 years later, he simply lost his faith. It was seemingly out of the blue, and what prompted it still appears to be a mystery. I just stopped believing in God, and I don't think it was anything more complicated than that, he says by way of explanation. His religious crisis saw Jonathan, at that stage 47, the son of a Devon pastor, quit his role as a presenter on BBC's Songs of Praise in 2007. I was always very vocal about it when I was competing that I was a Christian. It would be a bit weird to talk about it when I wasn't, he says. I don't go to church anymore. Not at all. The decision also sparked rumors that his relationship with his wife Alison, herself the daughter of an evangelist, was under strain. Jonathan says the couple are happy together, though he admits it has created a fundamental change at the heart of their family. They have 2 sons, Sam 20 and Nathan 18. Alison is still very involved with church, and she actually works for the church. He says, but neither of our boys goes to the church. They've made their own decision. It's all fine. The BBC anchor's man's religion was seen as a driving force behind his successful career, though his refusal to compete on Sunday cost him the opportunity to compete at the 1991 World Championship. But even without his faith, Jonathan, fresh from presenting the Winter Olympics and preparing to front coverage of the Paralympics, does not have the air of a man in crisis. I am happy, he says, and actually it's fine. I don't miss my faith. In many ways, I feel more settled and happier in myself without it. I don't know if that is related to losing my faith or would have been the case anyway, but it's a non-issue as far as I'm concerned. 7 years on, and I don't feel a gap in my life. I suppose that's a proof of the pudding, isn't it? Had I suddenly thought that life doesn't quite feel right, maybe I'd re-examine my faith. In fact, more than ever, I feel comfortable with where I am in life. And what a varied life. At the World Athletic Championship in Gothenburg, he set the world record for 18.29 meters, which made him the first man to jump more than 60 feet. That same year, he won BBC Sports Personality of the Year, and the climax of his career was a gold at the Sydney Olympics in 2000 as Great Britain's most successful medal-winning athlete. In 2001, he was made a CBE, and after retiring in 2003, he became a regular face presenting sport on the BBC. So it ends. About him now, that he says that Jonathan is passionate about his job, and hard work has given him a lovely 6-bedroom house in Gosforth, an affluent suburb of Newcastle, which he shares with Alison, who works full-time at their local church. But his work often keeps them apart. He wasn't always in such a good shape, he explains. I didn't do anything for 6 years, apart from play golf after I retired, and then I thought, this isn't good enough. So I got into road cycling and fell in love with it. I can go out for 3 or 4 hours quite happily a day. He's also preparing to compete in a big cycle event. What do you hear? What do you hear when I read this article to you?
Well,
how can you say that? He refused in 1991 to go and jump. He just gave God the whole time. He gave him honor. In 2007, he just turned his back up to that stage of his life. He just turned his back onto God and onto faith. What is the heart soul story? What you hear about Jonathan Edwards? What's the heart soul story? What's the saddest part of the story? Yeah, gave up. Isn't it so incredible? He's living now in a 6-bedroom house, and for 6 years he did nothing after retirement, just playing golf. And then you go and look at Eric Liddell's life, and that's opposite. So I'm going to read to you just the top part of the name of the article. So now we've got a testimony of both lives that came into a newspaper. But then if you want a one sentence, you always go and look at the name of the article. So, for Eric Liddell was a hero who ran like hell for the greater glory of God. That's the name of the article. Isn't it amazing? If that can stand on your tombstone one day. He ran like hell for the greater glory of God. So, what is the one sentence of Jonathan Edwards? Jonathan Edwards, I've taken a leap of faith and stopped believing in God. This is the name of the article. Yeah, you can make 10 sermons out of what's happening in these two papers. But the most heartfelt thing that I want to share with you today is this one sentence. What's the time now? Right. Alison is still very involved with church, and she actually worked for the church, he says. But neither of our boys go to church. They've made their own decision, and it's all fine. I'm going to give you a little bit of stats on this issue. In the 19th, the Swiss carried out research, and the question was asked to determine whether a person's religion carried through to the next generation, and if so, why or not. The question was asked to determine whether a person's religion carried through to the next generation, and if so, why, or if not, why not. So this is what they found. If both father and mother attend church regularly, 33% of their children will end up as regular churchgoers, and 41% will end up attending irregularly. Only a quarter of their children will end up not practicing at all. So if both of them attend, only 25% of their kids will turn their back on the faith. So, if the father is irregular and the mother regular, only 3% of the children will subsequently become regular themselves, while a further 59% will become irregular church attendees, and 38% will be lost. So we're just now talking about church attendance. So if the father attends irregular and the mother attends regularly, we're sitting with a situation that 38% of the children will be lost, will turn their back on God. The last one is, if the father is non-practicing, so it means he's not a Christian, and mother regular, only 2% of children will become regular worshippers, and 37% will attend irregularly. Over 60% of their children will be lost completely to the church. I want to take my hat off for the mothers that just continue, because 40% of the children will be saved. But 60% of the children will turn their back on the Lord when they go out of the house. This is the massive influence of a dad on a house. And this is what happened with Jonathan Edwards. Both his boys is out. Both his boys turned their back on the Lord. All 3 children of Eric Liddell had a relationship with God. Now I'm going to give you a little bit more stats. In any given Sunday, this is from America, almost 25% of married church-going women will worship without their husbands. Midweek activities often draw 70 to 80% female participants. Over 70% of the boys who are being raised in church will abandon it during their teens and 20s. Many of these boys will never return. 5 out of 6 adults in America call themselves Christians. This was 15 years ago. But only 2 out of 6 attend church on a given Sunday. The average man accepts the reality of Jesus Christ, but fails to see any value in going to church. 93% of all people incarcerated in jail are men, and 85% of them have no father figure. 33% of the 72 million children in America will go to bed without their biological father in the home. Fatherless children are 5 times as likely to live in poverty, repeat a grade, and have emotional problems. 75% of volunteers are women, volunteers in church. Children who live absent from their biological fathers on average are more likely to be poor, experience dysfunctional educational, health, emotional and psychological problems, be victims of child abuse, and engage in criminal behavior than their peers who live with their married biological mother and father. So Jesus said to his disciples just before he was crucified, Matthew 26 verse 31, this very night you will all fall away on account of me, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. I will strike the shepherd, and the flock will be scattered. What I give you now, the story that I give you now, the stats that I give you now is, I will strike the father, and the flock will fall away. Isn't it? Isn't this what the statistics say? God made fathers to be the spiritual authority in a house. That was his plan. And God is so protective about a marriage as well. You can see that. You can read that in the Bible. How many times don't we read in the Bible? And this is why God said it's so important for marriage, for the two to be united as one, and that the marriage must not break up. And the other thing is for the father to take position in the house as a spiritual authority. I want to read a letter to you. Kan jy net vir my daar onder daai oopmaak? Ek het hom vir jou gestuur vanoggend. So John Piper receives this letter. It says, and the woman's name is Kelly. Kelly writes to ask about spiritual leadership in the home. She writes, hello, Pastor John. My husband and I are still in the beginning stages of our marriage. Both of us were raised in Christian homes, but unfortunately both of us had fathers who failed to lead the family spiritually. Our mothers did that job. Now I desire my husband to lead our home spiritually, but we both don't know what that looks like. Does he lead prayer with me daily? Does he read the word with me daily? What do you do with your family? What did this look like for you? So he answered her. Well, my first thought is this. I wonder why Kelly wrote to us instead of her husband. So he gives a good explanation. But this is the crux. This is the problem. Why did Kelly write and not the husband? You see, what happens is God has got an authority structure. So when he made man, he said man must rule. He gave his authority to man. He ruled in Garden of Eden. And then with the help of Eve, he gave over authority to the devil. God sent his son to take that authority back. So before Jesus go up into heaven, before he sent, he says, all authority has been given to me on earth and in heaven. I took back the authority. And he's got a covenant relationship with his church. So, where he is the head of the church. And that same covenant relationship he's got with a family. Between him and the husband in a family. So the husband in a family has got to fill a specific role. And that is the spiritual authority in the house. That role was made for him to take it. If you go and look in Ephesians 5, that is the role God created for him. That's a covenant relationship. Carla talked about last week about the Geset love and said that God made that vacuum. And that vacuum is for him. And if you're going to fill it with something else, you're going to have trouble. And this is the same thing. So God made that position for the husband to take the spiritual lead. So, if he doesn't take the spiritual lead, then the statistics become part of the house, isn't it? Isn't this what I'm reading to you? So that role is so important, that the husband take the spiritual role to protect his family. Not only for himself, not only for his family, but for the future of his children. So the devil will come and nail that role. There's no doubt about it. If I, as Jesus said there, if I take down the shepherd, the sheep will run. So the attack will be on the father. The attack will be there. Because if he can falter, or if he can fall, or he doesn't function as in the spiritual role that God has made him, then the family is vulnerable. And then the kids is vulnerable. So we as Christian men don't have an option not to go and take that role. We know in the rugby world it works like this. There's an authority void on the rugby field. Two guys go onto that field, two teams go onto the field, and both teams have got their own plan, their own game plan. What will determine which game plan will eventually be the game is the team that will take authority when they go onto the field. Because there's a void. And the one who's going to take the authority, they will determine the rules, they will determine the game plan. So there's a void in a house, and that void is God put it there for a husband to become the head of the house, but also to take the spiritual authority. If you're not going to take it, who's going to fill the void? The mother will fill the void, or the children will fill the void. Never underestimate the power of a 2 and a 3-year-old child going for that position. They are little selfish little kids, those. And they will go for that position. And this is, so, if the father doesn't function, the mother's going to take over. And suddenly now the stats fall to 40%. I take my hat off for the moms that do it. And I say to you, well done. But I want to know, where is the dads in those situations? So, there's 3 attacks that you're going to get as a dad. The one is on your house and your position in your house. The second one is on your influence. And the third thing is on your testimony. So, the devil will come for that, because if he nails you in any one of those areas, he just nullifies you. So, first of all, I'm going to start with the easy one, your testimony. That's the easy one. 1 John 2 verse 16, for everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world. Easy. That's easy. That he will use those 3 things every time to go and steal your testimony. And if your testimony go, your authority go. Listen to what I tell you. So we can use Ravi Zacharias. Ravi Zacharias did incredible work throughout his 40, 50 years. Incredible work. But what do we remember about Ravi Zacharias? We remember that he had a weakness with women, because that came out at the end of his life on earth. That came out. So we remember back and we say, Ravi Zacharias had a weakness with women. The world look at that and say, whoa, check him. This was this big Christian leader who debated against atheists, and look at him. This is what the world says. This is what we remember, because his testimony was nailed by one of these 3 things, as I said to you. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the third thing is the pride of life. So that's the easy one. The second one is in where you're going to be nailed is in your influence. Because if the devil can nullify you in your influence field, you become an absent father. He's going to do it with 2 things. Passivity. Passivity is from the devil. Just passive. Because you're not going to make any decision, and you're not going to take up your authority. Wat is die woord vir as jy net uitstel? Procrastination. Yeah, this is procrastination. This is one of the parts of passivity, is procrastination. That's one thing. The second thing is, he's going to let you build your own kingdom. He's going to keep you busy, because you need time to influence people around you. So what's so easy? I just get your time. I take your time. You don't have any time to influence people around you, and I keep you busy in building your own kingdom. You go and see at the banquet, the invitation to the banquet. The one guy said, I bought 5 ox. I cannot go to the banquet. I have to go and look after them. Other one said, I bought land. I don't have time now for this. I have to go and look at my fields. So this is what happens. And this is exactly on the second thing. That's your influence. And then your influence is nullified. And when that you are nullified, you don't have any authority. You can't take up your spiritual authority. And then you become an absent father. And then your children are at risk of these statistics. The last one. The position, identity in the house. Guys, that position is yours. It's made for you. You have to take it. You have to be the spiritual lead in your house. That is a covenant that God wants with your house. That's a relationship that He wants with your house. I want to just stand still with one thing here is, I had a nice talk with Francois, and he talked about the transformational generation. Transformational generation is the dad that came out of, Francois, I'm right, the dad the father in the house that came out of a family where he was abused or where there was alcoholism or anything like that, and he broke the cycle. Is it? Right. And this is just one place where I want to stand still, because there's a lot of guys that comes out of a household where this happened, where you get verbal abuse, where you get physical abuse, where you get alcoholism and these type of things. And then you come out with wins out of that relationship. And I know my grandfather, my great-grandfather was a madman. So my grandfather broke the cycle. He was a transformational generation. And I want to just take my hat off for him now, thinking back what he's done. But he had a lot of wins in him. And those wins came through into my dad. And then my dad addressed that, but hopefully the Lord has protected me from that. But what I want to say to you, if you come out of a house like that, where you broke the cycle, I want to say to you, well done for doing that. I know that it's difficult to go and take up a role like this girl wrote when you didn't have the example. But well done for that. But the second thing that is just as important, you have to get healed. You have to get healed. You can't go back and say, I'm not going to take a spiritual authority in my house because I didn't have an example and this is what I experienced. You have to get healed, not for so much for yourself, but also for your children's sake, so that it doesn't go through to them, that your weaknesses don't go through to them. So to those guys, I want to say, well done, and I know that you don't have an example, but you need to go and take that role up. For the others that came out of a healthy house, why are you not taking up the responsibility? Why? If you had an example of your parents doing that, then why don't we take as men, why don't we take up the spiritual responsibility in our house? Why are we not leading? Why are most of the volunteers that come to church not men? Why is it women? I know that the family comes first, and this is true, that God made us to, and He said, I made you man and wife in Malachi. I made you man and wife so that you would bear godly offspring. So that is our first responsibility. Our children are our first responsibility, so that we will bring up godly offspring. But then, after that, what's standing? If you're not taking responsibility in your Christian life or in your spiritual responsibility in your household, I want to ask you today, guys, we don't have an option. We don't have an option to go and do that. If we're not going to take that up, and plan B comes where your wife has to do it, your family are prone to stats like this. So I want to ask you, there's another important thing. He said, children are guided more by what they see instead of what they hear. You cannot say one thing and do another thing. What you say is what you must do. That's when your children start trusting you. So I'm going to just end off today. I'm telling you two stories. I told you about Eric Liddell, and actually that's a hard story that he died at a very young age of brain cancer. But he gave everything to God, and he's got his medal now. He said, I'm running a race, and my race is for the medal that I will once receive. And he's got a gold. I don't have that any problem with that type of thing. But then we got another one, and another one where he started off so well. And we say both children turned their back on God because of a decision that a dad has made. Let's get to a situation where we get one day and we look back. An article about our life is the same as an article about Eric Liddell, and where they can say he was a hero. Most of us, the only time when we run like hell is when we run away. But he was a hero who ran like hell for the greater glory of God. Right, let's just pray. Thank you, Lord, that we can come to you today, and we ask you, Lord, that you will raise up mighty men for you, Lord. That you will raise up men, Lord, that will stand in the gap, that will cover their family, that will change the statistics for their family, Lord. That we will run a race right up to the end. So, Lord, that we can say like Paul said, I've run the race right up to the end, and I kept the faith. And may that be in our lives, Lord. May our lives be directed towards you, Lord, that we don't get distracted halfway, and that we start going after something else, and that one day we don't have a testimony. So, Lord, today we ask you that you will give us a testimony, that we will be able to endure, that we will build character, that we will hang on to your hope and know that that hope will strengthen our faith. I ask in your name alone. Amen.